Now let me try to argue this as a thought experiment. Let's take one area where 90% of the people say we've got to have regulation. Let's look at the drug laws. Let's take both legal and illegal drugs. Illegal first. I have a 18-year-old son. He's a freshman at Haverford College. My first intuitive reaction is to say, I'm glad that heroin, cocaine, meth are illegal. He can't zip down to the neighborhood pharmacy and go get high and hurt himself. Maybe he won't because it's illegal. I don't know that the law really works in that it doesn't seem to keep the stuff out of America. We can't even keep it out of prisons. I don't know how we think we're going to keep it out of America. And as you students know, the illegal drugs are not hard to get. So I'm not certain what the drug laws, what positive things the drug laws accomplish. I mean, maybe a certain percentage of you are going to use or abuse intoxicants regardless of what the law says. I suspect that's the truth. I don't know, though. But I do now know what the unintended consequences of drug prohibition are. And they are awful. They are far worse than the drugs. I'll just name a few of the problems. One is the drug crime. Why is there drug crime? Is it because people are getting high on things and committing criminal acts? Almost never. Probably the worst drugs that might lead to that are meth and cocaine, and maybe that's 1 or 2% of the drug crime. But 98% of it is because the drug is a black market product. So that the sellers can't rely on the police to protect their property. So they arm themselves and form gangs. And the buyers steal to pay the high prices. Our government says nicotine and heroin are equally addictive. But nobody's knocking over 7-Elevens to get Marlboros. It's the law that causes almost all the drug crime. Secondly, we're corrupting police forces. We're asking cops to turn down $20,000 bribes. Not all do. We're telling kids in poor neighborhoods that entry-level work is for suckers. Why work at McDonald's for minimum wage when your little brother can make more as a lookout for the drug dealers? And they're the role models in the neighborhood. The criminals are the people with the best cars and the best clothes. And we're building unbelievably rich criminal gangs. We forget that Al Capone and the Mafia were created southwest of here, because of alcohol prohibition. The gangs we're creating now are even richer. They'll soon be able to buy nuclear weapons. Osama bin Laden was funded partly with drug money. So why are we doing this? Well, to protect us from ourselves. But if that's the right thing to do in a free society, then where does it end? The society isn't free anymore. That's an invitation to have government come in and ban ice cream and fatty steak, make us have exercise police who come into our homes and make us run laps and do push-ups. Let's go on to legal drugs. Here, too, intuitively, I'm glad we have the FDA. Its mandate is make sure the drug is safe and effective. Thank goodness. I can't judge. How would I know? I'm glad we have these specialists who do that for us. And their first big success, a few of you are old enough to remember it, was thalidomide. This was a drug women took during pregnancy. It stopped morning sickness. It was a tranquilizer. It was effective. But some of those women gave birth to children, thalidomide babies, we called them, with children with no arms and no legs. It didn't happen in America, not because the FDA was so smart. They were just so slow that by the time it was toward the end of the approval process, the bad effects were being seen elsewhere. But I'm glad they protected us from thalidomide babies. But now I have to say, is it worth it? Absolutely not. Because government, in protecting us from bad things, protects us from good things too. And that's worse. Since the thalidomide success, the FDA has grown like all these agencies. It's grown tenfold in size. And now to get a new drug approved, it takes about 15 years. And some years back, they approved the new heart drug. This new beta blocker will save 14,000 American lives a year, they announced. And nobody at the press conference stood up to say, hey, that's great, guys, but didn't that also mean you killed 14,000 people last year? And the year before? No reporter asked that because reporters don't think that way. But think about it. It did mean that. 15-year approval process. If they're saving 14,000 lives a year, that's just true. Part of the problem is the media, and that the media takes a picture of the problem. I can put the thalidomide baby in the cover of the news magazine, as we did, but I don't know which of you would be saved by the new heart drug. I don't know whose picture to take. Right now, in the 15-year pipeline, there are fat substitutes, chemicals that would let you eat all the chocolate cake you want and not get fat. And we're waiting to make sure there's no carcinogen in there, and intuitively I say, yeah, let's make sure. But think about it. Right now, thousands of Americans die every year because we're too fat. Many of them would be saved. Don't they count in this equation? Not really. Because the bureaucrat is in big trouble if he says yes to something that hurts someone. But if he delays something that would save lives, nobody knows. Now, what am I arguing? Not to have an FDA? That sounds terrifying, and it's not going to happen. This is a thought experiment. But let me try to raise alternatives. First, why does the government, our government, get to be a police agency that says to us, no, you are forbidden to put that in your own body? Why couldn't it be a voluntary agency? Don't we own our own bodies? Why couldn't those of us who are cautious would only take those FDA-approved drugs? But if it was voluntary, you could try something. You could experiment without having to break America. If you were dying, if you had a terminal illness, you wouldn't have to break America's laws to import something illegally from Europe or go to some dubious clinic in Mexico. And we'd learn from those experiments, and what we learned would save other lives later. I'd argue further that we should have learned from the fall of the Soviet Union that government agencies don't do anything well. And if you simply eliminated the FDA's monopoly on testing, then private groups would spring up, the groups that have been driven out by the government monopoly, and they would do the job better, quicker, cheaper, more reasonably. Maybe Consumer Reports, maybe Underwriters Laboratories, which tests all the electrical appliances. The private sector does everything better. And most importantly, isn't leaving the choice to us, what we do to ourselves if we're adults, what America's supposed to be about? Patrick Henry never said, give me absolute safety or give me death. It's supposed to be about freedom. Let me move on to the other layer of safety protection we have in America, and that's the trial lawyers. I have a Wall Street Journal op-ed about them tomorrow. I should like what they do, because they're an alternative to clumsy one-size-fits-all government regulation. They're the private lawsuit, kind of like a supplement to Adam Smith's invisible hand. They're the invisible fist. You behave badly, they will punish you. And when people talk about reforming the lawyer rules, they always say, are you kidding me? Who but we will deter the bad doctors and the bad companies? And who but we will compensate the victims of their bad deeds? And the critics tend to fall away when they say that. But both arguments are specious. Who but we will deter and punish the bad actors? Well, excuse me, in America we have a lot of people who can do that. We got district attorneys, state's attorneys, attorneys general. If you cheat people, if you hurt people, we can lock you up. We got lots of prosecutors. And beyond that, we have the competition of the free market. That punishes bad actors better than anybody. Word gets out if you hurt your customers, let alone don't serve them well. And who but we will compensate the victims? Well, there are lots of ways to compensate victims. There's workers' comp, there's Medicaid, Social Security, disability payments, private charity, that's best of all. None of them is perfect, but all of them are better than what the trial lawyers do. I mean, what kind of compensation system is it where it takes the victim 10, 15 years to get their money? And many of the people who get the money are not really victims. A Harvard study of medical malpractice found most of the people who collect were not victims of malpractice. And most people who were didn't collect. It's a horribly blunt instrument. And what kind of compensation system is it where most of the money doesn't go to the victims, it goes to the lawyers?